Beloved, there comes a moment when the voice of God pierces the fog of all our business, all our excuses, all our clamor for security. And it comes not as a suggestion, nor as a whisper to be tucked away in the margins of thought, but as a thunderous decree shaking the very foundations of our hearts. You lose everything, and only one chance remains. How dreadful, how sobering, how utterly unlike the gentle comforts we often imagine when we dress the divine in our own softness, for this is not the language of indulgence but of urgency. It is not the patient meandering of a teacher waiting for us to catch up, but the final toll of a bell declaring that time itself, which seemed so endless, so vast and forgiving, has tightened into a single moment, a single decision, a single chance upon which all eternity hangs. One chance, and no more. To hear such words is to feel the stripping away of every pretense, every mask we wear before ourselves and before others. For what are possessions, ambitions, or the fragile towers of success when the Almighty says you lose everything? What are the accolades of men? What are the carefully gathered treasures? What are the comforts we nurse in our little nests of pride and vanity when God Himself says they are gone, blown away like dust in a storm? How weakly they shine then, like broken lanterns in the vastness of night. And in that dreadful light we see ourselves not as lords of our destiny, not as sovereign masters of our fate, but as creatures suspended by mercy, called to stand naked before the judgment of love, commanded to take this one chance with trembling hands. It is not cruelty that God declares such things, though to our ears it sounds like terror. It is the kindness of a surgeon's knife, cutting away the gangrene before death spreads. It is the mercy that refuses to let us drown in delusion, that refuses to flatter us with lies about second, third, and endless chances, when in truth we are creatures of dust with breath so fragile that at any moment it may vanish. One chance, and it is now. The deception we so willingly drink is that tomorrow will always come, that we may defer obedience, postpone surrender, delay the cost of yielding until a more convenient season. But the truth shatters such illusions. The door stands open now, but not forever. The voice calls now, but not forever. To presume upon another sunrise is folly, to gamble with eternity is madness. This one chance is not simply an invitation, it is a verdict, a dividing line, a demand that shakes us awake. For when God says you lose everything, it is not punishment but revelation. That everything we called ours was never ours, that every treasure we clutched slips through our fingers like water, that only what is given back to Him in trust endures beyond the grave. Think of the fool who builds barns, swelling with pride at the abundance of his storehouses, whispering to his own soul of years of ease and comfort, when suddenly the voice calls you fool. This very night your soul is required of you. All is lost, and what remains of your one chance is nothing but ashes of wasted days. Think of the man who spends his years chasing shadows, bowing before idols of wealth, fame, or fleeting pleasure, only to discover that at the end he stands empty, handed before the throne, having squandered the one coin placed in his care. The urgency of heaven is not for nothing, for God does not trifle with words. When He says one chance, He does not mean one chance to feel vaguely inspired, nor one chance to decorate the walls of our conscience with pious sentiments, but one chance to surrender, one chance to bow, one chance to trade ashes for glory, one chance to set aside the kingdom of self and enter the kingdom of light. And the terror of it is this, that many will hear and still delay. Many will tremble and yet turn away. Many will comfort themselves with the thought that perhaps another door will appear, another chance will be extended, as if God were a negotiator in the marketplace rather than the sovereign Lord of time. But the mercy of truth is harsher than the softness of lies. There is only one chance. To feel this truth deeply is to have the scales ripped from our eyes. It is to recognize that our days are not endless corridors stretching into forever, but fragile sparks flaring briefly before darkness. That our lives are not owned but loaned, that eternity presses against us not as some distant horizon, but as the very air we breathe. To squander such a chance is to squander the only thing that matters, to gamble with a treasure more precious than worlds. Beloved, the weight of divine urgency crushes every excuse, and it should crush them, for excuses are flimsy veils woven of pride and fear. We say we are too busy, but what is business compared with eternity? We say we are too broken, but what is brokenness to the God who makes all things new? We say we will decide tomorrow, but what is tomorrow but a promise that may never be delivered? This one chance is not convenient. It is not comfortable. It is not negotiable. It is the call to step into light, to bow before the holy fire, to surrender what we cannot keep in order to gain what we cannot lose. If we feel in our bones the urgency of this one chance, we will see the folly of clinging to passing things. If we sense in our hearts the voice declaring you lose everything, we will see the wisdom of laying all at his feet, while we still may. For better to lose all now and gain eternity than to clutch at shadows until they dissolve and find ourselves empty forever. The weight of this urgency is not to paralyze but to awaken. It is not to cast us into despair but to rouse us into courage, to remind us that the door stands open and the invitation still calls, but only for a moment. The one chance is not yet gone, for we breathe, we hear, we know the call. That is mercy, that is grace. That is the blazing kindness of a God who loves us enough to say what we do not want to hear. Lose everything. For you were never meant to build your life upon sand. Take this one chance, for you were never promised another. When God declares that you lose everything, it is not merely the voice of judgment, but the unveiling of reality itself. For we have lived wrapped in illusions as a man might sleep under a painted sky, believing the colors above him are the real heavens when in truth they are only fading pigments upon a crumbling ceiling. We cling to illusions as if they were solid walls, yet when eternity shakes them, they collapse like paper. Our illusions whisper to us that wealth can secure us, that possessions can shelter us, that applause and human approval can crown us, that our health and vigor are ours to command, that tomorrow stretches wide before us with unspent years ready to be wasted at our leisure. And yet all of these are lies dressed as comforts. When the hand of God strips them away, we do not lose truth, but gain it. For only then do we see that what we clutched was smoke. What we guarded was sand slipping through our fingers. What we idolized was nothing more than shadows cast on a wall. The stripping is pain, yes, but pain like the tearing away of bandages that covered a festering wound, and though we cry at the sudden exposure, we are nearer to healing than when we were hidden beneath layers of deceit. Consider the man who labors all his life for riches. He imagines they will shield him against misfortune. He dreams they will buy him peace. He trusts they will purchase for him dignity, honor, rest. And yet, when God says you lose everything, those coins scatter like leaves in a storm, their shine dulled, their promise broken, their weight revealed as nothing but chains that dragged him further from freedom. Consider the woman who builds her entire worth upon beauty and charm, who measures herself in mirrors and in the gaze of others, who thinks her value secured by outward form. When the illusions are stripped away, when time carves its lines upon her face, when sickness and frailty come unbidden, the God she served betrays her, and only then does she see the emptiness of what she worshipped. Consider the scholar who boasts of his wisdom, who gathers knowledge like trophies, who adorns his mind with arguments polished and proud. When eternity steps near, his cleverness cannot bargain with death. His learning cannot shield him from the grave, and all that seemed so luminous now flickers like a candle consumed by its own flame. The stripping away is ruthless, but it is mercy, for better to lose now than to awaken too late, better to be humbled in life than ruined in eternity. It is a strange paradox, is it not, that in losing all we find what truly endures. For the one who has been stripped naked of illusions, who has nothing left to boast of, nothing left to lean upon, nothing left to protect, is the one who finally discovers the solid rock beneath his feet. When the fragile scaffolding of pride and ambition collapses, when every idol is shattered and every false refuge burned, then and only then do we see the foundation that cannot be shaken. What joy there is in such discovery! though it comes wrapped in sorrow. For the hands that tear away are the same hands that offer eternal treasure, the same hands that invite us to exchange straw for gold, shadows for substance, lies for truth. We think losing is defeat, but in the kingdom of God, losing is the very door through which victory comes. To lose what was never ours to keep is no tragedy, when it makes room for what cannot be taken away. The illusions we love most fiercely are often those that must be most violently removed. Our pride whispers that we are self-sufficient. Our vanity assures us that we can manage life without surrender. Our stubbornness insists that we will bend later, tomorrow, perhaps when old age comes, but not yet. So God in mercy strikes at the heart of these illusions. He allows our towers to crumble, our plans to fail, our strength to falter, our pretenses to be unmasked, not because He delights in our weakness, but because only then do we see Him as He is. Only then do we know what it means to be upheld by grace, and not by the false props of our own invention. And what a strange awakening it is when the eyes that once adored the glitter of passing things suddenly behold them for the trifles they always were. We wonder how we ever thought them sufficient, how we ever stooped to worship dust. It is like a prisoner who clung desperately to his chains, as though they were ornaments, only to have them shattered and to realize they were nothing but the iron of bondage. Freedom at first feels like loss. Yet it is the only gain worth having. To lose all is the greatest terror to the worldly heart, but to the awakened soul it is the first breath of life. For what is truly ours cannot be lost, what is truly eternal cannot be stripped away. What belongs to the kingdom of God endures when every illusion falls. Love endures, truth endures, the presence of God endures, the hope of resurrection endures. These cannot be stolen by time, cannot be eroded by decay, cannot be crushed by the grave. And so the stripping away, though it tears us, though it wounds our illusions, though it leaves us trembling and bare, reveals to us the pearl of great price, the treasure hidden in the field, the only thing worth possessing. And those who discover it, though they may seem beggars in the eyes of the world, are richer than kings, for they have traded their illusions for substance, their shadows for light, their dust for eternity. There comes a moment when all the disguises are torn away, when the illusions lie shattered, when the weight of divine urgency presses upon the soul, and that moment does not leave us neutral. It demands a response, and the response required is not passive consent nor polite admiration, but courage, trembling and real, for the call of God is not to stand still at the crossroads, admiring the view. It is to step onto the narrow path, the way that cuts against the grain of the world, the way that demands the laying down of self, the way that costs everything yet gives more than all. Courage is needed, because every fiber of our flesh recoils from surrender, because every instinct of pride shudders at the thought of bowing, because the voice of the world howls against the path of obedience, mocking it as folly, warning it as danger, despising it as weakness. Courage is needed because to obey means to lose, and only faith can see that in losing we gain. To step onto that path is to defy the old tyrants of fear and desire. It is to say no to the comfortable chains of sin. It is to wrench one's gaze from the glittering temptations of ease, applause, and indulgence, and fix it instead on the unseen promise, the city not yet visible, the kingdom that comes not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of eternal truth. The trembling that accompanies such courage is not cowardice, but honesty. For who can stand at the threshold of eternity, who can hear the voice of God declare that everything is lost and only one chance remains, and not tremble? It is right to tremble when the ground beneath us shifts, when the air itself seems heavy with eternity, when the heart knows it is being summoned not to another round of delay, but to the decisive surrender upon which destiny rests. But courage is not the absence of trembling. It is the decision to step forward in spite of it, to place one foot upon the narrow way, even as the knees shake, to say yes with a faltering voice that yet grows stronger with every step. The call is not to those who feel mighty, not to those who trust their own strength, but to those who will yield themselves in weakness and discover that grace is sufficient. It is not by our own steel that we walk the narrow path, but by the strength poured into us as we walk it. The trembling call to courage is answered not by those who imagine themselves heroes, but by those who dare to trust when trust feels impossible. And the door, oh the door, it stands open still, but not forever. This is what makes the call urgent, what makes the trembling unavoidable. A door that will never close does not compel decision. We would wander past it forever, promising ourselves that one day, someday, perhaps tomorrow, we will enter. But the truth that shatters complacency is that the door does not stand open indefinitely. The hand that holds it ajar is merciful, but mercy is not indulgence, and time is not endless. To hesitate is to gamble with eternity. To linger is to risk hearing the terrible words that the door is shut. What courage it takes, then, to step through while it is still open, to abandon the familiar halls of pride and sin, to leave behind the crowded road, where the multitudes laugh and chatter, and to enter the solitary way marked by a cross. The laughter of the many will jeer, the accusations of the enemy will hiss. The whisper of fear will say you are losing too much, you are surrendering too far, you are abandoning yourself to an unseen promise. And yet it is precisely there, in the act of trembling obedience, that the soul finds freedom. For the narrow way, though hard at its entrance, broadens into a life unimagined, a joy untouchable, a hope indestructible. Think of the saints who walked before us, those who heard the same call, those who trembled and yet obeyed. Abraham leaving his land not knowing where he was going, Moses standing before the waters with only a staff, Esther risking her life with the words, "If I perish, I perish." Peter stepping from the boat onto the storm's waves, trembling and faltering, yet stepping nonetheless. None of them were fearless. None were made of iron. All of them trembled, yet all of them obeyed, and in their trembling obedience they discovered the faithfulness of God. So it is with us. The courage we are called to is not the swagger of worldly boldness, but the surrender of hearts that know their weakness, and yet step forward. Hearts that shake yet say yes, hearts that dare to trust the unseen rather than cling to the seen. The call of God does not flatter us into courage. It strips us of self until we must lean wholly on Him. And in that leaning we find strength that was never ours, courage that flows from beyond us, peace that does not belong to this world. The narrow path is lonely, yes, and it is costly. But the loneliness is filled with presence, and the cost is nothing compared with the treasure. The door is low, so we cannot enter carrying our pride. It must be left behind. The way is steep, so we cannot walk laden with possessions and illusions. They must be dropped at the roadside. The path is narrow, so we cannot wander with divided hearts. The false loves must be cut away. But what a joy to discover that every loss is gain, that every surrender is freedom, that every trembling step forward is a step into life. Courage, then, is not a grand performance but the simple act of obedience. The quiet yes whispered through shaking lips, the determination to take the step today, not tomorrow, for tomorrow may never come. The trembling call to courage is answered in the present moment, the only moment we are given, the only chance that remains. To refuse it is to drift into darkness. To embrace it is to walk into light. So the call resounds even now, even here, with the weight of eternity pressing upon us, with the voice of mercy urging us onward, with the door still open though it may soon close. Do not wait for your trembling to cease before you answer. It will not. Do not wait for courage to blossom within you as though it were natural strength. It will not. Step forward as you are, weak, fearful, trembling, and discover that the very act of stepping is the place where courage is given. For the God who calls is the God who strengthens. The one who demands surrender is the one who carries those who surrender. The one who commands obedience is the one who gives the will and the power to obey. This is the mystery of the trembling call to courage, that what feels like the end of self is in truth the beginning of life, that what feels like loss is the gateway to eternal gain, that what feels like death is the doorway to resurrection. And though the knees shake, Though the heart quivers, though the soul trembles, still the step must be taken while the door stands open, for it will not always remain so, and once closed, it is closed forever. There is a line, invisible yet certain, when delay is no longer possible, when the long indulgence of hesitation runs out, when the last hour strikes and eternity enters like a tide that will not turn back. God's voice that once called with patience now declares with finality, "You lose everything, and the one chance is no more." What terror to those who dallied, who thought themselves clever enough to bargain with time, who believed that the knocking at the door would echo forever, who imagined the invitation was as pliable as their whims. They rise to answer too late. They reach for the handle, but the door is shut, and the silence on the other side is heavier than thunder. This is the summons that comes when the breath leaves the body, when the heart beats its last, when the curtain is torn back and the soul finds itself before the burning brightness of reality with no disguise, no delay, no appeal. The illusions that once comforted are gone. The excuses that once persuaded are gone. The opportunities that once lingered are gone. And all that remains is the truth, naked and irreversible. How solemn, how dreadful, and yet how necessary to speak of this. For without it we would cradle ourselves in falsehoods. We would cradle ourselves in the sweetness of endless tomorrows. And we would die still asleep. The final summons is mercy wrapped in fire, for it is the declaration that what was temporary has ended, what was passing has fled, and only what was eternal remains. And though the soul trembles before it, though flesh recoils at the thought, still it is better to awaken now, while the door is open, than to awaken then, when it is forever shut, for when eternity begins there is no more bargaining, no more halfway steps, no more shadows to hide within. There is only the unveiled presence, the eternal weight of glory for those who chose, and the eternal loss for those who refused. This is why the voice cries with such urgency, why it strips away our illusions, why it calls us into trembling courage. Because the summons will come, and it will not wait for our convenience. It will not bend to our procrastination. It will not bow to our pride. It comes like a thief in the night, like a sudden storm breaking over the sea, like the cry of midnight that awakens the sleepers. And in that hour everything is decided not by what we wish to do someday, but by what we have done with the chance